Hello and welcome to the Briefing Room. I'm your host, Bill Freilich from WTCM Radio News, and it's our weekly roundup of stories making headlines across northern Michigan with some of the people covering those stories. And we're happy to have at the table again this week Peter Payette from Interlochen Public Radio. We've got Alan Campbell from the Leelanau Enterprise and Sarah Simnich from 9 and 10 News. Guys, thanks all of you for coming in. We've had a couple of weeks here at this table of kind of special topics. We've talked sports, we've talked the editorial page, we've talked photojournalism, so it's good to kind of get back in the news mix and talk a lot about what's going on. Obviously, this past week, September 11th has been on the minds of a lot of folks, and the anniversary. Anyone want to jump in on what you guys may or may not have done for coverage this year? Sarah, you and I were at the memorial in Grand Traverse County.
Yeah, that was really nice. You know, it's nice to have the actual artifact from the North Tower, and I think that means a lot to people. You know, a lot of people were touching it, and just, I think they feel that the event that happened so far away is kind of in our backyard now. We have a piece of that. And I think it's a place where people can go and just kind of reflect on that, if they need time or want to remember, and I think that it's a great thing. I think we're fortunate to have something like that locally.
What is the artifact?
It's a piece of steel from the North Tower that Metro Fire got, and they had put in for it, and along with several other area fire. Several fire departments across the country received some sort of artifact, but they didn't think they would get anything. And so they've had this, and it's kind of just been sitting in their parking lot because they haven't had a place for it. And now they've welded it into this memorial with bricks, and it's really nice. So,
what's it like in your newsrooms on September 11th? Just in terms of, I think we're in a different position than people from the news angle. Peter, what was it like going in this September 11th? A lot of talk about.
We didn't do anything at all, to tell you the truth, Bill. I guess we could have covered this local ceremony, but we didn't. We kind of rely on the network to provide that programming. They covered the ceremony in New York City, so that's what we broadcast. But at the station, we don't really have anything to do with that, so didn't really come into the day.
In Glen Arbor, we did cover a ceremony there, and I have to say that Glen Arbor has they go all out down there with their fire department, and I think within the next year, they will also have an artifact that's kind of been coming along. They haven't quite gotten it yet for whatever reason. And, obviously it's been 11 years, and I think we're not covering it from a shock perspective, but now from more of an historic perspective. And so it doesn't have, I guess you hate to say this, but this is part of time and history. It doesn't have the emotion that it once did, because frankly we've got a lot of other problems looking at us in the eye as a country. That's what happened in Leelanau.
Gotcha.
What was the turnout like at these events?
In Glen Arbor, it's always very, very good.
Yeah, this one was pretty crowded too.
Yeah.
Well, I know Leelanau County has been a busy place the last couple of weeks, Alan.
Yes.
One of the things that's gone on this summer is a lot of drownings here across northern Michigan. Leelanau County, no exception. And I know, Leland Township just had a meeting to kind of talk about what can we do, if anything, to maybe prevent some of this from happening.
Yeah, probably there is a shock factor there, obviously, and it's never been probably more apparent that we can have an effect on these because of a situation on Vans Beach in Leland Township, where you had two near drownings, and it became apparent that there is no system in place to warn swimmers, to warn people on the beach that it's dangerous to be out there. A lot of folks coming up here, and even people here, don't understand the power with rip currents. I've been pretty happy with how Leland, myself personally, speaking editorially, been pretty happy with how Leland Township has adjusted to this. I think originally there was a thought that, well, geez, there's not much you can do because it's just the big lake, and the big lake has these effects. But I think folks have understood that having a public beach and having no warning system, and then having a near drowning with your ambulance at the beach an hour before a fatal drowning, that I think has shook people up to the realization that if you're going to be in public office, if you're going to have public property and a public beach, some responsibilities come with it. So I've been happy with with what they've done.
And the conversation, as I understood it, was they're working on setting up a committee, but they're talking about what, warning signs, putting up those life buoy, life rings at the beach, and what can be done really.
Well, there's a sign up there already, so obviously that wasn't an impossibility to do. Unfortunately, it took a drowning of a local boy for that to occur. They will have flags, is my guess. They will have ring buoys. I mean, the idea that it's going to cost some money, you're going to have some folks just throw them out or take them home, or pretty small price in the long run. I think it really did affect the community to the point that it's number one on their list right now to get that straightened up, which is good. What you do with the other miles, I don't know. I know the Lakeshore is also discussing some further policies to help prevent that type of thing.
And there are some researchers up in Houghton that are, I think right about now, they got some money from NOAA, National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration, which runs the National Weather Service offices, and they're trying to figure out how they can better predict rip currents, apparently using the Doppler radar that's used to predict storms. And so they're doing some tests, I think in Grand Haven, but also up in the Straits, I believe. Apparently there's some really nasty rip currents, or there can be up there. So, but I get the sense they do some predicting. I mean, the National Weather Service will have warnings. Their marine forecast will have information about rip currents when they think there's a chance of rip currents, and they think they can do a better job maybe with Doppler technology, trying to figure out when they're forming and when there's a likelihood of them.
And I'm impressed no one said rip tide. So there you go. We're already experts on the subject, right? Okay, very good.
We're getting there. Sarah, tell me what else has been going on in Traverse City this week. We're kind of always getting something from city police about downtown events. This is another week of that.
It is, and a couple nights ago, I believe there was an assault on an employee of a local establishment, or a couple females that worked at an establishment, and I think that it down there with the bars, and you get people that drink, and I talked to Wilson Antiques yesterday, and they said our window's been busted twice. We've had 3 break-ins. They said our insurance deductible is through the roof, and they said we've been really talking to the DDA about maybe having some of these places police themselves, just so that they're not over-serving, or so, because it does impact a lot of them, and they're small business owners, and it gets expensive. And I know that city police have told us in the past, when they have foot patrols down there, there's nothing, that's not a problem. But unfortunately, they don't have them down there all the time. And these things happen late at night, and so it's tough. I don't know. I know that local businesses down there aren't too happy, though.
Alan, before we sat down at the table, you said something that caught my ear. As long as there have been drunk people, we've had problems. This isn't something that's brand new.
Union Street, let me think here. It's been a pretty happy place late at night through the years.
But, it doesn't have a season either. I mean, even when it's bitter cold in the winter, those places are packed, It really just kind of depends, but it's
well, bad. I think the other thing that seems to line up with that is the smoking ban, and not necessarily making the correlation that smokers are causing the problems, but you've got maybe a mob mentality. You've got everybody out on the sidewalks now. You drive through downtown, the sidewalks are packed, and one person who gets angry can spark something that,
And you're saying they wouldn't get angry if they were all smoking inside the bar?
Well, it didn't seem like we had those problems before.
Not as frequently.
Not until they all had to go outside, and, I don't know.
They weren't
seems like it's been happening more.
Thrown through the window of the neighboring business when they were inside.
Yeah.
I don't know. It seems to me to be a different atmosphere when you drive through town now. I heard from somebody yesterday who said, we used to go to the State Theater, we used to walk to the restaurants after the movie, and we felt fine. But now when we walk down Union, it's just this different environment. We don't feel quite as secure.
It is.
And there is that 2 to 3 block radius of sidewalks that are just packed with people all the time, all night long.
I guess that makes sense. I hadn't thought of it like that. But.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't have any, scientific anything to back it up. Just kind of anecdotal conversations. Peter,
What?
you looked like you were going to say something.
I was going to make a joke, but it would have been at the expense of the patrons of those establishments, so I'll hold it.
Let's talk about what else you're working on the radio at Interlochen Public Radio. You mentioned the Natural Resources Trust Fund is a topic that you guys have been covering, and some news there.
Right. There are a couple of state senators that have problems with how land is preserved in the state of Michigan. One of them is Darwin Boer, who is out of Everett, and he represents the district that includes Leelanau County and Manistee and Benzie, and then kind of hooks over through Wexford County. And I'm not sure where it goes under redistricting beyond that, but and the other is Tom Casperson, who's up in the UP. And Casperson had introduced the bill that now caps the amount of land the state can own until the Department of Natural Resources submits a plan to the legislature that the legislature has to approve about their strategy for buying land, preserving land. And now they have some legislation that would start to affect perhaps pretty drastically what land conservancies do and what even local communities do. I think an example people might be familiar with would be the Acme shoreline. That's been a pretty big deal.
Yep.
Acme, in the wake of all their trials and tribulations over the Meyer and the village at Grand Traverse, one of the things the community really rallied behind was the expansion of the shoreline park. They had kind of a small park there, and they saw some pieces of land up for sale, so they started purchasing adjacent properties and even ones that are further down the coast, but that land is fairly expensive, so they've gotten help from the Natural Resources Trust Fund, and this is a fund that has preserved a lot of really beautiful pieces of property. The Clay Cliffs up near Leland was at one recently. The open space in Traverse City, going back decades, was purchased with the help of this money. Arcadia Dunes is a big preserve down in Manistee County. The bills that are being proposed would make a number of changes. Conservancies that do this work, for instance, Arcadia Dunes is owned by the Grand Traverse Regional Land Conservancy. It says that they could be taxed. The land would not be tax exempt anymore unless they allow all uses on it, including ORVs. In fact, Senator Boer's bill says that the trust fund will only supply money to projects that allow ORVs. So I don't know if that would mean an ORV would have to go up and down the Acme shoreline through the park, but under this bill, the way it's currently drafted, there would have to be ORVs allowed for the trust fund to make any, assist communities making purchases. And then there's some other rules which it's not clear to me what they're aimed at. So one says that conservancies and local communities couldn't go out to the landowners and say, would you like to sell us the land? They couldn't, the word is not initiate, but solicit the sale. And I don't know if there's a problem with communities pestering landowners to sell to make a park, but so this is in there. And it also, the other change that has gotten a lot of attention is that it would change the Natural Resources Trust Fund Board and to make it much more responsive to elected officials, current elected officials. Right now the board is kind of a lifetime appointment, and the people who are there are somewhat separated from current politics. And this would make it so the board would be made up of people who are going to respond much more to the governor and the leaders in the two chambers of the legislature. Folks in this region who do this kind of work are scratching their heads a little bit. These projects are very welcome. I mean, the Clay Cliffs was a big deal in Leelanau County. The Acme shoreline, everybody loves it, and they're not sure why these senators want to make it harder for them to do that work.
What's on the edge of creating some type of constitutional crisis, because it's not as though the legislature created this fund and it's all within its jurisdiction. The Natural Resources Trust Fund was set up through the state constitution, been one of the most popular projects of the state. It was, as you remember, it was started as a compromise with opening up the state forest land over by Atlanta to drilling. And so it set up a place to put all the state revenues for drilling to make sure that it would be used for natural resources and preservation purposes. And like I say, this thing has been set up in the Constitution. It's been running fine on its own, and it is a kind of a surprise to see state legislators trying to tweak it, and in my opinion, as you say, trying to tweak it more for the needs of today, or perhaps today's politicians, as opposed to the long-range plans and goals which were established within that fund. So there's a lot of folks in the natural resources committee or world who are very upset and take this to heart, because this was a long, hard-fought compromise of what to do with this money, and it was never meant for state legislators to have, if you will, to be that close to picking winners and losers within the system. It's quite a detailed system. I mean, there's a pointing system where when they have projects, it's really all. It's not like now the folks on the Natural Resources Committee Trust Board pick winners and losers. They have a committee that actually weighs all of these, and they just take as far as the money goes. Well, the danger is that it becomes who's in office and my project goes on top. The reason it's been successful is because that's not happened in the past.
Although Tom Casperson would argue that it should be more political, that that's the system of government we have in the United States and in Michigan, and that the politics, as Alan's explaining, it's really handled by professionals in the department. They're the ones that review the projects and say, this would be a good conservation project. And so from Senator Casperson's view, he's saying, well, why should people who are kind of connected to what he might call bureaucrats be the ones making all these decisions? No, let's put it out into the process where elected representatives have to make these decisions. But I'm not sure elected representatives are the best ones at handling, long-term, large resource management questions. That's why you have a Department of Natural Resources to do those things.
Well, let's take a break here on the briefing room. We're just past the halfway point. We'll come back, talk more about some of the stories making headlines across northern Michigan in just a minute.
What is Up North TV?
It's TV that you do.
You pick the topic.
You write the script. You run the camera.
You edit the video.
It's your vision.
Your perspective.
Your story.
Commercial free.
Free speech.
What is Up North TV?
It's me.
It's you.
It's all of us.
View us on Analog 97.
Cable digital too.
Digital 992.
UpNorthMedia.org.
Welcome back to the briefing room. I'm Bill Freilich, your host, and we're joined by Peter Payette from Interlochen Public Radio, Alan Campbell from the Leelanau Enterprise, and Sarah Simnich from 9 and 10 News. Guys, wanted to touch on something in your paper, something that we've been covering on the radio, something that Sarah's been talking about, the Steve Duman trial getting underway this week in Grand Rapids. And, I guess we don't have to dwell on too much of the details, but a sad case from a year ago, right up in Peshabe town, Alan.
It's a shocking case, and as the court records have come out, the defendant has a history of this type of abuse, and we talked about it a little bit before. You get grossed out just talking about this case. This should never happen in a civilized society. I don't know what you say beyond that.
Yeah, this was a 4-month-old child who was killed during a sexual assault and on trial in federal court because it happened on tribal land. Sarah, take us through just briefly some of your challenges, because I think we all have the same challenges in trying to get information. It's a local case, it's a local story, but it's one that we have a hard time covering when it's in Grand Rapids.
Yeah, well, initially it was tough to get anything on it because tribal police aren't very open, about saying anything. But then the FBI got involved and they released, some affidavits and things like that we could get our hands on and at least kind of get the general details of it. But what we actually report, we have to be very careful with because it's graphic and so we have to tread lightly with that. But even now, just calling the courts and kind of getting jury selection was last Friday, and then day one of the trial started on Monday. Just getting information when you're not in the courtroom is tough because you likely call and talk to someone that is not in the courtroom, and they're looking at just what's been filed paperwork-wise. So it's always a little bit of a struggle to update our viewers in that case when you're not there, but it's definitely something we like to follow because it does have a local impact.
Well, what you said is something I'm sure that all newsrooms in northern Michigan are going through with this case, because you don't want to sugarcoat this thing, and yet it's the more details you put in, the more the more a newspaper sounds like a pornographic magazine. I mean, and that is the truth, and so. You can't, as a news organization, you can't shy away from telling the truth, but you have to remember your audience. So we have really struggled as far as how much information and details of information to put in and cover the story to the point that people understand that they should be shocked by this because it is a part of our community and it is a part of our society. And if you're not shocked, then it's easy to forget that this goes on, and it's a part of us, and it's something that we need to struggle with and try to combat. So I know you guys go through that all the time, and we have some painful conversations in our newsroom. I guess in the end we just do the best we can and try to remember who we are when we report.
Well, I think that too, it's like, it's tough to put aside your journalistic bias, I think. It's gross. This is gross. There's no way you cannot think that. I mean, when I first heard about the accusations or what apparently happened, I just didn't even think it could be true. I thought there's no way that can be true. And then when these files came out and you actually read it, it makes you nauseous. I mean, it makes you sick.
So probably half of the folks out there don't know what we're talking about. Now here we are in this situation. Do we explain, do we say what the allegation is?
Right.
Thank God we have a good leader.
We're going to let you make that call, Bill.
And we're out of time. Well,
a sexual assault with a 4-month-old baby is really all they need to know, I think.
I think that that'll sum it up accurately enough. And if people want more details, there are other.
You can check out the Leelanau Enterprise.
That's right. No, but you made a good point too. And for the radio, I did 2 versions of this story on Monday when the trial started. And in one of the versions of the story, I was slightly more detailed than the other. But I was going through that in my own head too. What should I say? Can I put this in one line where it will be sufficient? And because you also, like you said, you keep your audience in mind. I'm trying to envision the family driving down the road, picking their kids up from school at 4 o'clock, have the radio on, and I don't want to be graphic to them with kids in the back seat. So you kind of keep all that in mind. The other part of this too, and you alluded to it, Sarah, and I'm also thinking of the Baby Kate trial down in Mason County. When you're not there in the room, when you're not in the courtroom, it's hard to follow up on day-to-day operations. It's nice, for example, with Baby Kate this week, the child missing in Ludington. Stations in Grand Rapids have also covered that. There are other resources, teamwork, other news organizations, if you've got partnerships with them that make it easier. But if you're not in that courtroom, it's really hard to get maybe those day-to-day updates, isn't it?
It is tough. Basically, like I said, paperwork that's been filed, but you can't be there, you can't take notes on what the witnesses that are testifying are saying, or people testifying. You can't take notes on that. You can't get a feel for emotion. It's really just over the phone. So basically, just getting the facts on it.
And the same thing is true even in minor cases. Whether it's a breaking and entering up in Sheboygan or something up in the Sioux. If we're not in that courtroom, we're relying on the phone call to the clerk's office to find out what happened, and it can be 5 hours. It can be the next day
Right.
before that clerk has the information
Right.
in their hand of what actually happened. So just a challenge, I think, in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm.
All right, well, let's shift gears a little and end kind of on an upbeat note. Your top story here, Alan, in the paper, the Sleeping Bear Dunes
Oh,
were
my
fast
gosh.
approaching, if not already exceeded the
Right.
record. And I
That's
think we've
great
all talked
news.
about this story at this table before. They've been on pace to do really well this year.
We're going to go from the most beautiful beach in the most beautiful place in America to the most crowded place in America. No, there's still a lot of room on the lake shore.
And then there's going to be no room for anyone.
There's still, as we speak right now, it may be that the full year record for attendance at Sleeping Bear has already been broken, 9.5 months into a year,
Yeah.
which is, well, it's always amazed me that the attendance kind of went down through the last decade. Kind of a gradual slippage. I could never quite figure that out because it seemed like there was always plenty of folks around, and the businesses seemed to do pretty good. But after, I don't know if it's the Good Morning America thing and a number of other good publications, everyone is covering, it seems like, the lakeshore, and maybe that's having an effect. Why do you think, Peter? Is it the coverage, or do you think it's just
I think
good weather?
I think it's the coverage.
Yeah.
But I would agree. It is mysterious that the numbers wouldn't be coming up over the last decade. I mean, all I've seen up here is increasing growth and development, and the tourism industry just keeps adding new amenities, new restaurants. It seems like it would have been a steady growth with maybe a spike after Mario Batali got on there, but that does seem hard to explain.
I remember we did a story on the higher visitor numbers a couple months ago, and we went on like a Tuesday, and it was or a Wednesday. It was like the middle of the week. It wasn't a weekend when people are vacationing, and there were cars from everywhere, Texas, Florida, and I grabbed 4 or 5 people to interview, and they were from all over. And some of them, said, "Oh, we're from New York," or "We're from Minnesota," and we drove here, and then we heard we have to see Mackinac too, and I thought that was really neat. In the middle of the week, people are they're really coming from all over the country. I mean, it's one thing to say that, but they really are. There's license plates from everywhere.
That was what the opponents of the park back in the '60s complained about. They said, "We don't want a park here. We don't want all these people coming up," and now all those people have arrived.
That's what we got.
1.36 million, the record, and we're at just shy of 1.3 now. So
I think
that
it's
was
great.
as of September 1st.
So we still have Labor Day in there. So yeah, it's very conceivable.
Yeah, we may be over the
This
hump,
month.
if there is a hump to that.
Well, guys, thanks. Wish we could talk more. We're out of time, though. Sarah Simnich from 9 and 10 News.
Sarah, you have something you want to tell us about an upcoming day? Or something?
Oh, my wedding.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, it's in 9
news.
days. It's in 9 days.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thanks, guys.
Exciting.
My news family.
We'll get some coverage on that for you. And the Leave It On Enterprise with Alan Campbell and Peter Piet from Interlochen Public Radio. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. I'm Bill Freilich from WTCM Radio News, and we'll see you next week here on the Briefing Room.